workshop is really about basic rights in special education. The purpose of this workshop itself is to help you learn about special education law, to help you become a better advocate for your child during the IEP process. This handout itself provides a lot of different slides on a lot of different information. To the extent that I can add information as I go that I think is helpful to parents, I'll try to do that. The lines on the side are obviously for you to take notes. And again, if there's questions relating to the specific information in the handout, please raise your hand, because if you have a question, it's likely that someone else does as well. So first we have the federal law. The federal law is the Individuals with Disabilities Act. In addition to the federal law, there's a set of federal regulations. So consider the federal law to be the floor. You can never go below what the federal law requires that your child receive with regard to their rights under special education. In addition to the federal law and the federal regulations, we have the Massachusetts state law. It used to be called Chapter 766, but that law has been changed, and it's now Chapter 71B, and that relates to children's special education rights in Massachusetts. In addition to Massachusetts statute, we also have Massachusetts regulations. Now, copies of the Massachusetts law and the Massachusetts regulations are on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's website, which is basically our Board of Education's website, and you can go on there and you can access those for free. So I always like to refer people to resources that are free, because then you can go on yourself and read them and not have to hire somebody to do that for you. I would say that the most helpful information is the regulations themselves. They're not written in an overly legal way. They're generally comprehensible, and it will give you things like the definitions of a disability. It will give you the specific information on IEP development, sort of the team meeting process. So all of that is available to you to reference from time to time. You might want to look something up before your child's IEP meeting. You may want to go back, and if someone told you something at the IEP meeting that you don't think is correct, you can go back and check the regulations to see if that information is correct. And if you have an issue, then you can follow up with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's Office of Program and Quality Assurance, because they're responsible for ensuring that the procedures outlined in the regulations go according to what those regulations state, okay? And again, that is a free resource, so you can call them at any time and ask questions. So really, the principles of IDEA are that it's parent and student participation. Your child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. Your child's also entitled to be educated in the least restrictive environment. These are sort of terms that are on the second slide. The least restrictive environment means in your child's neighborhood school, learning with their non-disabled peers. So that's the presumption under the law, that if just because your child has a disability, you should not think that your child needs to go to school anywhere other than their neighborhood school and the classroom that they would have otherwise been in. So that's a presumption, whether, yep?
When you reference second slide, what slide are you referring to?
I'm sorry, it's on page 2, second slide.
Okay.
Okay. And then also the term procedural due safeguards. That means what parents' rights are if something doesn't go right in the process of the IEP development and issuance, that you have a right to appeal the decisions if there's a disagreement amongst the team. You know, it is a team process. Parents are obviously important members of their child's team. You know more about your child than anybody else in this world, and your input into what your child's needs are is important information, and you want to get that information included in your child's IEP so that the needs that you know that they have are addressed, okay? The next slide really refers to free and appropriate public education and what that means. It talks about that it's not only academic needs, but it's functional needs as well. It really comes down to what the individual child needs. Some children will have one specific need. Other children will have a whole host of areas that they need to be addressed under their IEP. And the IEP itself is to be based on each individual child, what that child's disability is, and how that disability impacts that child's ability to make progress, not only in the general curriculum, but also in other areas of their life. Special education is not just about reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about preparing your child for further education later in life. It's for preparing them for independent living, and it's to prepare them for the workplace as well. So if your child has issues, something as simple as toileting, well, obviously we know that if a child is behind in toileting and their disability impacts their ability to acquire that skill, that's something your child needs to acquire an independent skill in, because it's going to impact their ability later on in life to function in society, to function in the community, to function in school, or in the workplace. So it all leads back to special education services and what the unique needs of the child are. A free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, again, that talks about in the child's neighborhood school. The issue is based on the curriculum frameworks and what your child needs to be learning in terms of what is their grade level, what are the curriculum frameworks for that grade, and how your child can be educated in the least restrictive environment, meaning in the regular education classroom with the supports and services that are necessary to meet your child's individual needs. That's not to suggest that all children can and should be educated in the regular education classroom. Again, it comes back to the individual child and what their needs are. For some children, their needs will require that they get some services or all services out of the regular education classroom, because that's what their needs require. They might need one-to-one tutoring, in a phonetically based reading program. They might need occupational services in a different setting. It can range from a whole host of things, and it all comes back to what are your child's needs, and how do those needs get addressed within the IEP. Yes?
So you mentioned twice your child's neighborhood school. So you mean that the lottery process within the zone doesn't apply to a child who has an IEP?
Under the IEP process, first you determine that the child's eligible for special education services, then you develop an IEP. And then after the IEP is developed, then you look at the placement. And what I'm saying is that the presumption under the law, meaning what you're first supposed to look at, is whether that child can be educated with supports and services in the school that they would have otherwise been educated in had they not had a disability. So while we don't go through the regular assignment and lottery process, because it's part of a team process under special education, the placement that should be available to your child would be what would otherwise be available to them if they didn't have a disability. So it's inclusion in your child's neighborhood school unless the team decides otherwise.
But when you say neighborhood school, you mean inclusion in the school your child is assigned to?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm talking about in terms of neighborhood school, I'm not talking about the regular education assignment process that's by a lottery and you put down your three choices. I'm saying if there's a school closest, close to your home, I mean, obviously that would be the school I would be looking at first when my child's IEP is developed about whether or not it's appropriate for them to go there. And what I'm saying the law says is that that's where you start out. You start out by saying, unless we decide otherwise, the child should be included in a program with their non-disabled peers with the supports and services that they require because of their disability in terms of the special education services.
At the school closest to their home?
Yeah, I'm not saying like it has to be the geographically closest. I'm just saying that you don't have to think of only sub-separate programs in specific schools located in different areas. I'm just saying, generally speaking, it's where your neighborhood kids go to school, where their non-disabled peers go to school.
But they go to school all over the zone.
Okay.
All right, but you're not saying it's the school that's closest.
No,
to
I'm not
that.
saying
Okay.
it's a designated school.
Okay.
I'm just saying it's a school that would otherwise be available to them if they didn't have a disability.
Okay.
Okay? And that's actually the issue about the next slide, which is the least restrictive environment. So again, it's can the child be educated with supports and services along with their non-disabled peers, according to what their needs are, and it is a team decision. But that team decision is looked at after the IEP is developed. So first you do the IEP, and then you look at the issue of placement. The next slide actually just provides you with references and also websites to the federal and the state law, which I went over before, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. And then there's also the 504 law, which talks about, for some children, they won't be eligible for an IEP because while they have a disability, you have to have a disability and you have to, because of that disability, require specialized services, and whether that's specialized services academically or it's one or more related services. And the related services are, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, behavioral services, ABA, those are types of related services. So you have to have a disability, and you have to, because of that disability, require specialized services or one or more related services. So for some children, they're only going to require accommodations in order for them to access it. And the example I would generally give to that would be if there was a child in a wheelchair, and the only impact of the disability was their ability to navigate the school building and sort of even not just the building itself, but in the classroom, then that child would have accommodations if they needed, say, a desk of a different height, and those types of things. It's not specialized services. Accommodations you should think about as things that you're able to bring into the classroom or that you're able to bring into the building to help the child to access the general curriculum and the life of the school. Yes, ma'am?
My question is, how about if the child has a 504 that is not working for the child and the IEP was denied?
That would be what, she asked if your child has a 504 but it's not working and an IEP was denied. That would be an issue that I'd want you to put down on a question on one of the index cards I gave out so I could follow up with you directly on that. But you can definitely, with regard to sort of the IEP process, we'll talk about that as we go through this. If it's denied, you can appeal that decision, and that comes back to the evaluations and what information was available to the team. And again, the team looks at the evaluations and then determines if the child has a disability, and then because of that disability, if they require special education services or a related service, okay?